I never used to be afraid of the night. Late shifts didn't bother me, and I actually enjoyed the quiet drive home, the world hushed and still under the glow of streetlights. But that was before the nights changed, before I started feeling like I wasn't alone. It began a month ago. I was leaving work late. As usual, the office nearly empty except for a few others finishing up. The parking lot stretched out in front of me, mostly vacant, just a few scattered cars left under the flickering overhead lights. My sedan sat at the far end, close to the tree line where the company lot met a narrow, unkempt patch of woods. As I walked, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a figure standing near the tree line. They were barely visible in the dim light, just a dark silhouette against the trees. My first thought was that it was just someone from work, maybe taking a smoke break or waiting for a ride. But they didn't move. They just stood there, motionless, watching. I picked up my pace, my keys already in my hand, my heart beating faster than it should have. I told myself it was nothing, but as I fumbled to unlock my car, I glanced up again. The figure was gone. I barely slept that night, every creak of my apartment settling, making me jump. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it had just been some random guy, maybe even a trick of the light. But the feeling didn't go away. The next night, I checked the lot before leaving. Nothing. No one. Just the same old, empty spaces and the dull hum of the security lights buzzing overhead. I sighed in relief, told myself I was being ridiculous, and headed to my car. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. They were light, deliberate, and close. Too close. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. No one was there. Just the trees, their bare branches swaying slightly in the breeze. But I knew what I heard. I didn't waste another second. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and sped out of the lot without looking back. The whole drive home, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see something behind me. But the road was empty. By the third night, I had a plan. I wasn't going to let my imagination get the best of me. I parked closer to the building, directly under one of the security lights. I finished my work quickly, eager to leave before the parking lot emptied out too much. But when I stepped outside, my stomach dropped. There, across the lot, leaning against the hood of a dark car, was a man. He wasn't someone I recognized from work. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a hood pulled low over his face. His posture was casual, but something about him sent a ripple of unease through me. I told myself to ignore him, that maybe he was just waiting for someone. But as I moved toward my car, he straightened. Then he took a step toward me. I froze, my breath caught in my chest. He took another step, then another. I turned and ran. I didn't care how it looked. I sprinted back toward the building, my heels slamming against the pavement, my keys clenched in my fist. I fumbled with the door handle, yanking it open and slipping inside just as he reached the base of the stairs. I didn't stop until I was inside, my back pressed against the wall, my chest heaving. Through the glass doors, I saw him standing there, just outside the glow of the security lights. He tilted his head slightly, as if considering something. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Security did a sweep of the lot, but found nothing. No car, no footprints, just empty asphalt and the whisper of wind through the trees. They told me they'd keep an eye out, but their words felt hollow. I changed my routine after that. I started leaving work earlier, making sure I was never alone in the lot. But the feeling never left. The paranoia crept into every part of my life. I started locking my doors twice. I kept my blinds shut. I checked behind me every time I walked to my car, no matter where I was. Then, last night, it happened again. I was driving home, the roads mostly empty, my headlights slicing through the dark. I was almost home when I noticed it, a car in my rearview mirror. Close. Too close. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just someone heading in the same direction. But when I switched lanes, they did too. When I turned onto a side street, they followed. Every move I made, they matched. I took a sharp left, my pulse hammering, and hit the gas. The car followed. I didn't recognize the make or model, but I knew that feeling, that cold, creeping dread in my gut. It was them. I could barely breathe. I turned again, this time into a small gas station, pulling right up next to the doors. The car didn't follow. It kept driving, disappearing into the night like it had never been there at all. I sat in my car, hands gripping the wheel, my whole body shaking. I don't know who they are or what they want, but I know one thing for sure. They're not done with me yet. Now, let's continue listening to the next story. The first time I saw the car, I didn't think much of it. It was an old, dark sedan with a dented bumper and one headlight dimmer than the other, parked near the far end of the lot, half hidden in the shadows of the flickering street lamp. It wasn't unusual for cars to be left overnight. Employees sometimes carpooled or had to leave their vehicles behind due to mechanical issues. But something about this one put me on edge. I worked late shifts at a distribution center, often leaving well past midnight. The lot was always nearly empty by the time I clocked out, and most of the other workers had long since gone home. That night, as I walked to my car, I noticed the sedan's engine running, its low hum blending with the distant buzz of the street lamp. I couldn't see inside. The windows were tinted darker than usual. I quickened my pace, clutching my keys tightly, and slipped into my car, locking the doors the moment I was inside. When I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The sedan didn't move. For the next few days, I barely thought about it. But then I saw it again. Different spot, same car. This time, parked closer. Still running. My stomach twisted. It felt deliberate. I looked around the lot, but there was no one else there. I kept my head down and walked briskly to my car. Just as I reached my door, I heard it, faint but distinct. A low whistle, carrying across the empty space between us. I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse without looking directly. A figure sat in the driver's seat, barely visible through the dark window. My fingers trembled as I fumbled with the lock. I climbed in, shut the door, and started my engine. As I pulled out, I saw the sedan's headlights flicker on. My heart pounded as I turned onto the main road. I watched in my mirror. The sedan followed. I took a longer route home, weaving through back streets, checking my mirror every few seconds. The car stayed behind me at a steady distance, never closing in, never backing off. Just there, watching. When I finally reached my apartment complex, I pulled into the well-lit parking lot and sat there, waiting. The sedan didn't turn in. It kept going, disappearing down the dark road. That night, I barely slept. The next day, I told security. They nodded, said they'd keep an eye on it. That night, the sedan was gone. I let out a breath of relief. Maybe it had just been a coincidence. Maybe I'd been overreacting. Then, 2 nights later, it returned. This time, it was parked directly across from my car. Engine silent. Lights off. Just sitting there, waiting. I hesitated before stepping outside. My pulse pounded in my ears. I gripped my keys so hard my knuckles ached. The lot was eerily silent. No wind, no distant chatter. Just me in the car. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. Each footstep echoed against the pavement. As I neared my car, I heard click. The sedan's headlights flicked on. A figure inside shifted slightly. My breath caught in my throat. I forced myself to keep moving, my hands shaking as I unlocked my door. I could feel eyes on me, watching, measuring. I slid into the driver's seat, locked the door, and started the engine. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as I reversed out of my spot, the sedan's engine rumbled to life. My chest tightened. I turned onto the road, my hands clammy against the wheel. The car followed. I drove aimlessly at first, hoping it was just a coincidence, but when I switched lanes, so did they. When I took an unexpected turn, they did too. I wasn't imagining this. I was being followed. My mind raced. I didn't want to go straight home, not with them right behind me. Instead, I headed toward a gas station, its bright lights a beacon in the darkness. I pulled in quickly, parked right in front of the entrance, and jumped out, pretending to check my tire. The sedan slowed as it passed, its dark windows rolling by in eerie silence. I didn't breathe until it had disappeared down the road. For a while, things seemed normal again. I changed my routine, parked in different spots, left work earlier when I could. But the fear never fully faded. Every night, I checked the lot before stepping outside. Every drive home, I watched my mirror, waiting. Then, one night, something changed. I had stayed late, too late. The lot was empty. As I stepped outside, my stomach sank. The sedan was there, but this time, the driver's side door was open. A man stood beside it, tall, unmoving, facing me. I froze. My keys slipped in my grip. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, half shrouded in shadow. The distance between us felt suffocating. My throat went dry. Then he took a step forward. I bolted. My legs moved before my brain could register. I fumbled with my keys, hands slick with sweat. I threw myself into my car, locking the doors with trembling fingers. My breath came in ragged gasps as I started the engine. I looked up, he was still there. Closer now. Then he smiled. A slow, deliberate grin that made my stomach churn. His teeth glinted under the streetlight. He raised one hand and waved. My tires screeched as I sped out a lot. I didn't look back. I called security from the road, barely able to get the words out. When I returned the next day, they said they'd checked the footage. They saw the car, saw me running, but they never saw the man. I haven't seen the sedan since that night. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I feel it. That same crushing weight of unseen eyes. Watching, waiting. And I wonder if, somewhere in the dark, that man is still smiling. Now, let's continue listening to the next story. I never expected to be afraid of my own workplace. Sure, I work late sometimes, but I had always thought of the office as a second home. That was before the night everything changed. It started small. A strange sound in the empty hallway. The feeling of being watched when I stepped outside to my car. At first, I chalked it up to exhaustion. I had been putting in overtime for weeks, and my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, the elevator started behaving oddly. One night, just past midnight, I stepped inside, ready to descend to the parking garage. The door slid shut, but instead of moving down, the elevator jerked to a stop. The lights flickered. The panel's buttons were unresponsive. My stomach twisted as I jabbed at the emergency button, but only static crackled through the tiny speaker. Then, as if someone had pressed it from the outside, the button for the 10th floor lit up. I never worked on the 10th floor. It was supposedly under renovation, closed off for months. My breath caught in my throat as the elevator shuddered and started moving slow and deliberate upwards. When the doors slid open, the hallway beyond was dark, illuminated only by the dim glow of an exit sign. I should have stayed inside. I should have waited for the doors to close, but something in that pitch-black corridor drew me forward. The air was thick with dust, and the sound of my own breathing felt too loud. I stepped carefully, the carpet beneath my feet oddly damp. My fingers brushed the wall, feeling the peeling paint. I told myself to turn back, to get back into the elevator and leave, but then I heard it. A whisper. Soft, unintelligible, but close. My body locked up, every instinct screaming at me to run. But my legs wouldn't move. The whisper turned into low murmuring, then laughter, dry, brittle, like leaves crumbling underfoot. I spun around, searching for the source, but I was alone. I backed toward the elevator, my breath coming in short gasps. The doors had shut, leaving me stranded. I slammed my palm against the button, praying it would respond. The whispering grew louder, shifting locations surrounding me. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the end of the hall. A shadow, just barely visible, stood in the doorway of an empty office. It wasn't moving, but I could feel it watching me. The elevator dinged behind me. I didn't think. I threw myself inside, slamming the closed doors button repeatedly. Just as the doors slid shut, something moved. A blur of darkness lunging forward. The doors sealed, and the elevator dropped so fast my stomach flipped. When it finally stopped, I burst out, sprinting for my car without looking back. That was 2 weeks ago. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion, a trick of the mind. But then, the emails started coming. They weren't from anyone I knew. No sender, no subject. Just a single line of text in the body. You were not supposed to see. I deleted them. They kept coming. I told security, but they found nothing unusual. No logs of the elevator malfunctioning. No footage of me on the 10th floor, even though I know I was there. The security cameras had gone black for exactly 10 minutes that night, right when I stepped out of the elevator. Then, my apartment door was unlocked when I got home. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. But I know I locked it before I left that morning. The worst part came last night. I woke up to the sound of whispering inside my bedroom. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, locked in place by some unseen force. Shadows pooled in the corners of my room, shifting, stretching toward me. The whispers turned into words, a rasping voice right next to my ear. You should not have come. My vision blurred. A shape loomed over me, faceless, featureless, but unmistakably there. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs, and then it was gone. The room was silent. My body released from its paralysis. I bolted upright, gasping for air. The clock on my nightstand blinked 3:13 a.m. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I don't know if I ever will again. But I do know one thing. I'm not alone, and they're not done with me yet.